Okay, now you're recording. You can go ahead.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just want to let you know when I'm not speaking, I will have this on mute. I'd like to ask everyone to also stay on mute. I'm just going to pull up and go through some of our preliminary remarks that have been shared by the CB11 staff in order to welcome everyone to our first meeting of the fall season. So if you'll bear with me one moment, I will be reading from my cell phone. It's a very big file that's loading.
Okay, take your time.
I found that when I have too many documents open, it eats up my system too much, and then I can't be on video with you guys, and I'd love to see you all. So bear with me. I'm going to try to run it from the computer and the phone. So I want to remind everyone that this is a webinar style presentation and welcome you all to the Human Services Committee of Manhattan Community Board 11. Today's meeting is on Monday, September 20th, 2021. It is now 6:06 p.m. My name is Nye Whitaker and I'm the chair of this committee. I'd also like to welcome our new vice chair of the committee, Arturo Perez. Welcome, Arturo.
Hi.
And also we are joined by our amazing community associate, Marlene Pierre, who's the staff liaison for our committee. So little wave Arturo, little wave Marlene, so that everyone can see who you are. So in order to conduct an efficient meeting, we're going to observe a few ground rules. For those who this may be your first meeting, this will be new information. If you are returned, this is a repeat of the rules that you may have heard in the previous season. No one may speak until granted the floor by the chair, the vice chair, or the liaison. So that means myself, Art, or Marlene. CB11 members, if you have questions about board business or wish to make a motion, we ask that you please raise your hand through the Zoom features. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should then be able to find and raise your hand through the function there. If you're still having technical difficulties, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty to myself, our vice chair, Art Perez, or Marlene, our liaison. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topics. Such remarks should be made again by raising your hand via the Zoom and waiting till you are called upon. The chat should only be used to alert us if there's a technical difficulty. For example, if you are supposed to be speaking at the moment and are unable for some reason to unmute yourself and need our assistance, or if you are trying to raise your hand and for some reason that function is not working. When a member of CB11's Health and Human Services Committee is given the floor, I will identify you by name and ask you to unmute yourself. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through the Zoom and wait to be recognized. Please note that I will always call on the committee members first before opening any topic to the community or the general public for question or comment. Marlene, is there anything else that I've missed before we move to taking attendance by roll call?
No, you said everything.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask Marlene to please now take attendance by roll call of the committee members.
Sure. Eva Chan.
Present.
Thank you. Cindy Garcia.
Present.
Thank you. Robin Krinsky.
Present.
Yes. Patricia Martin.
Present.
Thank you. Jennifer Meyer.
Present.
Thank you. Shirley Pena. Arturo Perez.
Present.
Xavier Santiago.
Present.
Thank you. Isaac Scott.
Present.
Thank you. Robin Strachan.
Present.
Thank you. And Nye Whitaker.
Present.
Thank you. You have a quorum. So,
Great. Seeing that we have quorum, at this time, we are going to move forward with the items of the agenda and the adoption of the agenda so that we can begin this meeting. I believe, Marlene, that the agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the staff at the CB11M board office and posted online. And if there's no objections, I would like to move with an adoption of the agenda. And so I would like to ask for a committee member to first and then second. I am acknowledging Robin, who's raised her hand. Marlene?
I'm
do we
sorry,
need
Nye,
to-
you don't have to, I apologize to interrupt. You
It's
don't
okay.
have the first and second. If there is an objection, then you go into a first and a second.
I love how we're expediting procedures.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to first give a moment to pause to make sure that there are no objections to the previously distributed agenda. And so I just have to scroll through. Seeing none, then we're going to move for an adoption of the agenda. So just want to double check, Marlene, is there anything else we need to do to move forward on the agenda?
No, this will just be noted as the agenda was unanimously adopted with no.
Without
objection.
objection. Perfect.
Yeah.
The adoption of the June minutes, I need to pull up those minutes and share them. I'm going to ask a point of chair's privilege to move that further down on the agenda, because if I put it up now, I will lose all of my video for the rest of this call. So I will use it as old business if that's appropriate, Marlene, so I can put it up on the screen and then share out with the committee members.
Right, so if you want to move it down the agenda, then that would have been something you would have spoken about under the adoption of the agenda. You would have asked if it's okay to move it to old business.
Okay.
Yeah, but you've already voted. You could vote again on the agenda and then ask your committee members.
Right.
if they're fine with that.
So I'm going to put out for vote to the committee members if we could revise the agenda briefly to move the adoption of the June committee minutes to the end of our agenda under old business to allow me to be able to present and participate via video, because if I open up another window on my computer, that will be that. So I'm going to put that actually up for a vote. And so Marlene, I'm assuming I need a first and a second for that.
Yes,
Right. So I'm going to ask for a first and a second to allow us to move the item of adoption of the June committee meeting minutes to old business in order to allow us to move forward. I see Cindy Garcia has raised her hand. Is there anyone else? I see Pat Martin. So Cindy, please, if I could ask, is that a first or a second?
First.
Great. And Pat Martin?
I second it.
Great. All in favor, just by an audio round of ayes?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? Are there any abstentions, excuse me? Great. Marlene, I'm assuming that that means that this is passed by a verbal
yes.
majority. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I will then just make a note that that will be addressed under new business and will allow us to fully participate with our presenters, and your chair is fully present. Marlene, can we go to the next slide? Great. So we're going to begin. I just want to make sure that everyone had seen that there was a cluster of Legionnaire's disease found in Harlem, specifically in 10035 and 37. And I know that the Community Board 11 had included in their newsletter information about those clusters and what we can all do to stay safe. I just wanted to make sure that this was on people's radar, because I know that most people are paying attention to the outbreak of COVID and the Delta virus, but we do have another disease that is present in our community. And if you remember, there were several clusters over the past previous years, and I want to make sure we all stay diligent. There is information posted on the CB11M website, and we will also include information as part of the minutes of this meeting regarding the information that's been shared by the New York City and the New York State Departments of Health. Does anyone, member of the committee, have any questions and or comments related to the Legionnaires outbreak that they would like to add at this time? Cindy, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Chair, for acknowledging me. As you know, I've been a community organizer for the past 6 years in this community. During one of my ventures,
Well, Cindy, it seems like we may have lost you during one of your ventures was the last that we heard. Marlene, do we still have a Cindy with us?
It doesn't look like it. No, she's still here. She probably has connection issues, but.
Here we go. So sorry about that. Yes, my connection is a bit spotty. Thank you so much for your patience. So as I mentioned, my ventures in actually sharing information with New York City Housing Authority residents regarding the PACT program, or as it was known at that time, 4 years ago or so, the RAD program. I went into the Martin Luther King Jr. Development where there was an information session by the Tenant Association, and there they shared some of the challenges and concerns that they had regarding some of the buildings, specifically around security issues, around lack of services, lack of actual repairs being done to the development. They had spent years at that point without appropriate gas and electricity and plumbing. Most people were simply using hot plates. And as you know, as this committee knows, this is an issue that is happening throughout developments across all our cities. Specifically during one of those information sessions, I met with other presidents during the cluster meetings for that Ethel Velez had headed, or I'm unsure if they're still meeting. But during those times, I was able to speak with local New York City Housing Authority Tenant Association presidents. And they were very open as to the challenges that the community is having, specifically around one development, the development that now we are discussing with this Legionnaires outbreak. When she shared with me some of the challenges that her residents were having, the respiratory issues, the loss of life, the loss of quality of life, I grew very concerned, and I recommended that as a tenant association president, she request from New York City Housing Authority an air quality test to make sure that the outbreak that they were attempting to contain at that point is not actually propagate and actually cause further damage to our residents. Unfortunately, that president, when she brought this to the table to the New York City Housing Authority and to other agencies, she was removed from her position. So as a member of the Human Services Committee, I would like to request from this committee that they further ask questions regarding the actual protocol that was used in order to address this cluster. Not only this cluster, my apologies, but also the original one and any other ones that they have been surely keeping quiet. Because if it gets to a point where it goes from one person to 3 to now 9 individuals hospitalized, it is high time for New York City Housing Authority and all the other agencies, the health department, everyone and their grandmother to come together and pay very close attention, because Harlem has been affected by a number. We already have 3 or 4 respiratory issues that our people are battling. We are dealing with a neurological issue that we do not fully understand how this is affecting our children's brain. We are not fully aware of how this virus will actually propagate and or how it will have the impact in our lives. So I beg of this committee to because I know that all the hard work that it has been put into this, and I know all the resources that you provide, and I know all the hard work that you do and all the long night hours. And I am so truly blessed and grateful to be a part of this committee for that and to be under your leadership, Nye. I'm truly blessed for that. But we need to acknowledge the fact that our people have been unjustly suffering, unjustly, tirelessly working and advocating for our well-being, and it is falling on deaf ears for too long. So the Legionnaires cluster will only continue to propagate if we don't take the appropriate actions. So I request further from the committee to
Thank
call
you.
in.
Yeah. Thank you,
to call-
Ascendi.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure that we stay on schedule because we actually happen to have the chair of our Health and Human Services from the City Council here, and he might be able to provide some insights. So I'm going to pause there with you, Ascendi, and we will discuss this again a little bit further during today's meeting. Before we move on, I just saw that Robin, his hand is raised. Marlene, I just want to double check, is Robin K, not Robin S, a new member of our committee? Is that correct? Hi, Robin, welcome.
Yes, she's a new member, Nye.
Yes, welcome, Robin. I just want to make sure that your hand is being raised about something related to the Legionnaires cluster, just so that we stay on schedule. Is that correct, Robin?
No, I was not going to speak. Firstly, yes, I am a new member, and thank you so much. I'm so very proud to be part of this committee. But it's not about the Legionnaires that is happening in the community, but it is about two issues that I feel that.
Okay, I'm just going to have you pause right there, Robin. I just want to stay on topic. Right now,
Okay.
we're going to talk about the Legionnaires disease
Okay.
cluster, and I will circle back to you just so that we stay on topic and get through our guest speakers. And there will be another point where we can open up for other discussions that are not currently on the agenda. So I'm going to pause on the Legionnaires because, as I said, we do have some speakers with us today who can speak a little bit about this more. And so I'm just going to ask Marlene. Marlene, what is the next item on the agenda for the slides?
The next item is Padmore and the council member.
Great. So I would like to I know that the council member has many other things on his agenda. So I wanted to segue into the council member followed by Padmore. So I would like to welcome council member Mark Levine, who is also the health chair and a very dear friend to our East Harlem community. Council member, are you available to speak?
I am. And Madam Chair, thank you so much for having me and for your very kind introduction. And it's wonderful to see all of you on the CB11 Human Service Committee. You picked the right committee. This is such a critical issue now for East Harlem, for all of New York City, because of the pandemic and because of so many other challenges that we're facing in our health. Legionnaires being one of them. We've seen a steady increase in the number of Legionnaire cases citywide, actually nationally and globally, probably connected in part to global warming. And very worrisome, the most recent cluster, which Ascendi was focusing on in central Harlem. It's centered around the area of 135th and Lenox. So I think it's a little bit outside of CB11, but obviously I know of great concern because it's our neighbors uptown. The most recent update is that there have been 18 cases identified. All of them were contracted back in August, and they, as is the normal protocol, the city ordered an immediate cleaning of all the cooling towers in the area. Those are these devices that are on big buildings with central air conditioning. Sometimes people confuse them with water tanks, that are very common. You see the wood barrels on a lot of buildings. But this cluster seems to be not related to water, but related to the puffs that come out of one of these cooling towers. And and what they do is they order a cleaning, I think within a mile radius, and then they do samples and then to identify the culprit, which was the cooling tower, which was the source. And that's the piece that we haven't heard back yet on. I'm told that very, very soon they will be publicly identifying which cooling tower it was. And I know we'll all be anxious to hear that. And I see Osendi's raising her hand. I don't know if it's appropriate, Madam Chair. I'm happy to take the question, or if not, I would probably pivot to
Yeah,
close.
I'm just going to say that I'm going to let you finish the presentation, but I will ask if you could please share the status of any updates and reports that you get related to this, because it is our neighboring zip code and area.
Absolutely.
And also, as a side note, we will follow up with you just about the status of tests of cooling towers, particularly in NYCHA and senior residents in East Harlem, to make sure that we can get ahead of and prevent anything cross-contamination, et cetera, because we know that the lack of repairs in our district, do also create breeding grounds for additional disease and health, negative health outcomes. So Cindy, I'm just going to pause for a minute and let the councilman finish his presentation. Thank you, Councilman.
Sure. And just to clarify that NYCHA buildings, because they don't have central air conditioning, don't have cooling towers on their roofs. But that doesn't mean that someone who lives in a NYCHA development couldn't be walking across the street, and if there's a contaminated tower near there, couldn't be impacted. And this does tend to, Legionnaires is basically, it's a form of pneumonia. So it's people who are older or have other complications. One very common one is COPD, just anyone who's vulnerable to a respiratory disease. Unfortunately, or for better or for worse, NYCHA residents tend to be older and tend to have, there could be some health complications. So this is definitely a concern. And this gets so complicated, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but sometimes hot water systems can be contaminated with Legionnaires. And so when the hot water turns it to steam in a shower, you can breathe it in. That's not what happened in this recent Harlem case, but that had happened in recent years in some NYCHA developments. So that's a little bit different. That's a hot water system. And then you're in the shower and you know how much steam you get and you can breathe it in. So, and just the last thing on this, because there's also confusion, even you don't get Legionnaires by drinking. So that's not a worry in any case. That's just not how that disease works. But I am eager now to talk about our pandemic, which is unfortunately still ongoing. I'm sure most of us hope that by September of 2021, this would just be a memory. But Delta had other plans, and it was a tough summer for New York City on the COVID front, with a real serious spike in cases and hospitalizations. And though it's not talked about that much, even deaths went up over the summer. Back in June, it was probably about 2 or so people a day, which is still any death is heartbreaking. But by now, it's gone up to I don't know, about 10 or 12, 13 a day. So even on that front, and you think about that over a month, you're talking 400 people or something. And so this is still a very real crisis. We did see some improvement over the worst days, kind of in the peak in early to mid-August, as people started to get vaccinated in bigger numbers. And I think people, because they were worried about seeing Delta in the news, started to be a little more diligent about mask wearing and things like that. But I don't think anyone says we're out of the woods yet. The fall presents challenges because we've been living our life outside over the summer. It's the best thing about New York City. We do our birthday parties in the park. Everyone's doing outdoor dining, and even lots of events and meetings, and it's so much of our life happens outside, which is much, much safer from a COVID perspective. And as the weather gets cooler, we all go back inside. And so that's a real concern. And you remember last year, in the fall, we started to see cases pick up again. We have vaccination working for us this year, thank goodness. But with Delta, even that might not be enough. So this is still a time for real caution. Vaccination remains by far our most important tool. And to the extent that there's anyone out there who has not yet gotten your vaccine, know that it is, at this point, probably one of the most scrutinized vaccines in human history, with billions of doses globally, and an unbelievably good track record of safety and effectiveness. And so it really is important that you get your vaccine if you haven't. I know folks talk about medical conditions that might make it difficult for you to get your vaccine. There are very, very, very few situations where a doctor would tell you not to get vaccinated. Basically, it's people who are allergic, have severe allergies to one of the ingredients in the vaccine. And that's about, out of 1 million people, about 2 to 5 individuals. And even for them, the doctors will usually give you a treatment so you can get the vaccine. So really, with only very, very rare exceptions, everyone really should get the vaccine. In fact, now it looks like many of us will be able to get and should get a booster shot. The final rules on that are not yet set, but it's probably going to be focused on 3 groups of people. Those who are over a certain age, likely over 60 or maybe over 65, those who have medical complications, and people who work in healthcare. And for now, it's only going to be for the Pfizer vaccine, although very soon there's expected in the coming weeks to be announcements on boosters for Moderna and also J&J. I got Johnson & Johnson myself, and there's been a frustrating lack of news on boosters for J&J, but that all seems to be coming soon. And the city's ready to start offering those shots immediately, as soon as next week, if that's possible, and we're hoping about that. And so there'll be a real role for the CB11 Human Services Committee to let people know when boosters are available, and that it's important, particularly if you're in one of those vulnerable categories. And there's more good news on vaccinations actually just today, that it appears approval for our young kids, ages 5 to 11, could be coming soon, and that we could actually have shots in arms in New York City for kids age 5 to 11 by Halloween. So that would be a great treat for Halloween. And I know many of you have kids of that age. Certainly there's so many in East Harlem and Community Board 11. And so that's an exciting vaccine opportunity coming on the horizon. I mentioned before that vaccination is not enough, and testing just remains extremely important, even if you've been vaccinated, because though your chances of getting COVID are much, much less if you have your vaccine, it's still possible that you could get the virus. So you do still want to get tested regularly, particularly if you're in crowds or exposed to someone who has the virus. Again, even if you're vaccinated, the city will now come to your home and do a test for you. For example, someone who is not very mobile, that's a great option. By the way, the city will come to your home to give you a vaccine as well, and you can pick any vaccine of the 3 you want. So really, it's a good opportunity for people who are homebound, seniors, people with disabilities. You can get either a test or a vaccine right at your door. It's free. It's done by a trained medical professional. Testing is also important in our schools, and I've been really fighting to increase the amount of testing that we're doing in the schools. I think the gold standard would be testing every kid weekly and every adult in the schools. That's what Los Angeles, for example, is doing. New York City's testing now just 10% weekly. And Robin, I see asking about how to arrange for homebound seniors testing. After I finish speaking, I'll put a link in the chat. It's very easy to sign up, and it's free, as I mentioned. I would like to also see more of the self-rapid tests. These are great. It's kind of like a pregnancy test. You get an answer in 15 minutes. You can do it at home. It should be a lot easier to get one of these tests in New York City. In other parts of the world, they're very inexpensive. They're available everywhere from supermarkets to vending machines. They're $1 or $2 or $3 each, or even free in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, here, you got to pray you find one, a pack of 2 at a pharmacy, and they're hard to find. And they're still not cheap, $24 each. So I'm really pushing the city to use rapid testing much more for all of us, but also in the schools where, you know, if a kid has to quarantine, send them home with a package of self-tests, and you know, you could allow them to come to school every day as long as they test negative with the self-test. There's lots of great options there. And then the last thing I'll mention as part of our strategy, and I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair. Don't forget about masking, even if you're vaccinated, particularly if you're in an indoor setting, a crowded indoor setting. You know, it's officially not mandated in supermarkets. I wish it were, but it should be. It's officially not mandated in bodegas. Again, I wish it was. And but it is still important that we continue to wear our masks, even if we're vaccinated, because there is a chance that the virus can still spread. So I realize I talked for a lot, but it's an important topic that I'm passionate about. Thank you for giving me that time. And Madam Chair, I'll pass it back to you if appropriate. I'm happy to take questions on any of this if you need to move the agenda along.
No, we would love to have you for a few
Great.
more minutes, council member, for a couple of quick things. One is, would love for you to talk a little bit about the school closures. There
Yes.
was one in East Harlem in our district last week, corresponding with one that happened in Brooklyn. So if you could just speak a little bit about that, because I know that there is a concern for other, you know, parents and those in the communities about the adults and the children and family members associated with that school. So I'll start with that one, and then I have one other thing when you're finished.
Absolutely, and I see that Arturo had a good point that the rapid tests are not free. They're not in New York City, but they are in other parts of the world, and they should be free here, as should the PCR test. You know, in Washington, D.C., you can go to any library, and they'll give you a free home test kit. Those are the kinds of things that I would like to see in New York City. It's crazy that 19 months into this pandemic, they're still making people go and stand in line to get a test. It should be much easier. But yeah, as for the school closures, boy, what happened in East Harlem is really disturbing, particularly because it's a District 75 school, and we know that so many of those young people have other health complications that mean we have to be even more careful vis-a-vis COVID. If I'm not mistaken, what has turned out to be the problem in that school was an in-person professional development gathering before the kids came back, where I guess there was a teacher who had the virus and it spread. And so they determined it would not be safe to keep the school operating. I guess it depends on how you look at it. It's horrible that there were so many cases at that one school. The fact that there have been relatively few school closures, if you want to be more optimistic, is good. And there was a big change announced today by the mayor that as opposed to sending all the kids home for quarantine, if there's a case in a given classroom, that they would be much more limited in who they sent home. Obviously, the child who tests positive has to be isolating, but they would only send other kids home to quarantine if they weren't wearing a mask and were less than 3 feet away. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how in the world do you even track that? I mean, kids, they're moving around. How does a teacher even know? Also, you might have things happening in the hall or whatever. So, you know, I'm a little worried about that. I think that it'd be much better to surge in testing as a way to keep people from having to quarantine. There are some school districts around the country that, as I mentioned, if one kid tests positive in the class, then you send all the other kids home with a bunch of self-test kits, and that as long as they test negative every day, they can keep coming back. So you keep the kids in school. You have to have a lot of testing to do that, but we should be doing that. Should be the plan. So
That would require remote options.
Well, yes, absolutely, and it's been frustrating that there haven't been more remote options as well. But you know, there are. Look, obviously, ideally, kids would be in person and families who want that. it's frustrating to have your classroom sent home for quarantine. And it would be better to have a test option. They call it test to stay, where if you test negative every morning, you're good to go, you're back in class. And that's really best for the kids.
And then I just wanted to ask if you could comment on, the whole vaccine slash testing for indoor activities. We've seen a lot on restaurants and theater,
Right.
but there's been some incidents really recently that have caused some concern for people. And so if you could just comment briefly on, the kind of the indoor gathering versus outdoor gathering policies and where you see that going forward to make sure we're protecting not only the employees at our, many various venues that we're bringing back our economy, but also keeping our community safe.
Right. I mean, that is, you described the challenge. That's right. We want to bring back our economy and we want to keep our community safe. And I do think that vaccine screenings at places like indoor dining and other venues is a way to do that. And I think it's ultimately good for business. And this program, which is officially called the Key to NYC program, requires vaccination screening in indoor dining, indoor gyms, indoor entertainment venues like movie theaters, Broadway theaters, all in the indoor setting. So for outdoor dining, this is not an issue. If someone's doing a yoga class in the park, that's not an issue. If you have a community theater project doing an outdoor performance. But for those kind of things that are done inside, there is a vaccine requirement. I'll tell you why I think it's good for business, because at this point, 80% of the adult population of New York City has already had one dose. And that's the requirement to get in. And so already most people can participate, but there are people out there who they're not going to be comfortable dining in a restaurant indoors if the people next to them are not vaccinated. So a lot of customers that are much more likely to go to a gym, to go to a Broadway show. I mean, personally, there's no way I would sit in a Broadway theater packed in like that for 3 hours if the person next to me is not vaccinated. There's no way I would do that. And there are a lot of people who feel that way. And I am vaccinated, obviously, but it's still not safe. So it was really frustrating to see that incident last week of a restaurant host at Carmine's near Times Square getting attacked as part of the screening process. Actually, there was reports that make it look like it might have been a little more of a confusing scenario than we first understood. So I don't want to get too much into that case, but I do feel for restaurant staff that are being forced to kind of enforce this. And so I really my plea to everybody is, do the right thing, be nice to the staff. They're trying their best. This is hard for them. And many of them have been out of work over the last year and a half or been sick themselves. And so let's all be nice to the staff. But for now, I do think that this program is great for public health because it makes those venues safer. It convinces people to get their vaccine. But I do also think ultimately good for business for the ways that I explained.
And then last but not least, before we let you go, I know that some of our businesses and other institutions were impacted by the storm. And so I didn't know if you, before you leave, had any comments on what people can do to access any resources as they come back. This is the anniversary of, Hurricane Maria. We've seen these storms get harsher and harsher on our communities and our environments. And so I know that there's some resources available. I didn't know if you wanted to comment in any way on that.
Wow, I mean, this is so upsetting that we had two storms that by the old standards were once every 500-year events. Obviously, we had two in one summer, so we got to throw out the old standards. But, most of East Harlem doesn't normally flood like that. There are parts that are low-lying for sure, but nowhere safe now if it's just about rain, because we're all getting rained on. And when you get 3 inches of rain in an hour, that's terrifying. And it was deadly. Thank God no one in Uptown Manhattan died in the most recent storm, but we know we lost more than a dozen of our fellow New Yorkers citywide. And we have to assume that the next storm is around the corner, and we have to prepare our infrastructure for that. We have to upgrade our sewers and our drains. We have to harden our subway system so that it doesn't shut down when we have heavy rain. We have much more work to do to make housing resilient, including NYCHA developments. And a lot of that has been done post-Sandy in the areas that flooded in Sandy, where things like boilers were elevated. But that hasn't been done citywide. It hasn't been done, to my knowledge, in East Harlem yet. And the small businesses, which have been pummeled over the past year and a half by the pandemic, by the economic shock, and so much else. This is just another blow, and it really pains me. And the Department of Small Business Services has made assistance available. And also, after I finish speaking, I'll put a contact info in the chat about where local small businesses can turn to apply for aid, because I know that there was a lot of stores that had, like, particularly their basements flooded, and then lost merchandise.
Especially in our southern portion of our district, you know, that lower level of the FDR, when you get to the southern portion of CB11,
Yes.
you know, is very vulnerable, especially after Sandy, you know, to present day for flooding issues, as
Yeah.
well as our subway system.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to ask, before we wrap up with the council member, if there are any members of the committee that would like to ask a question, if you could please raise your hand. And then if there are any members of the public that have a question, I will call on committee members first. So if you're a member of the public, please raise your hand. Use the raise hand function so that I can call on you next. So I'm going to recognize, Cindy, you had your hand up earlier, but I'm going to just see if you had another question for the council member, just to keep on time, as opposed to a comment. We can follow up with him afterwards for general comments. But if you have a question, Cindy, I'm happy to recognize you, and then followed, it looks like, by Eva would be after. Cindy, are you still with us? Okay, I'm going to recognize Eva Chan.
Thank you. So I've been coordinating with the Asian organizations in Harlem. And one issue that we face is that the Asian seniors tend to not read English and Spanish. And oftentimes the healthcare information that distributed to them are not in the language they can understand. And are there any support within the city to help in this regard?
Well, Eva, thank you for that extremely important point. Language access is a public health issue. And just like every service the city offers, we have to do more to offer content, written content, especially in the languages of the city, including the various languages of the Asian American Pacific Islander community, which as you know and rightly mentioned, is a large and important and growing component of Community Board 11. You know, I sometimes I think there's more good Asian or specifically Chinese language. I don't know which specific language you're referring to, but I think particularly there's probably more Chinese language content from the health department available than people realize. And so the health department probably has to be better at getting it out there. I would be happy to connect you to the right person in the communications team at the health department who has all that. And you could also identify if there's content which is not yet adequately translated. But I think what you might find is there's more that they've translated that's just not getting out to people. And you know, this committee and this community board could help with that. I will.
Yeah, I would love if you could connect me, council member, with that information. I will share it with Marlene and Eva. And Eva, as a follow-up to this meeting, I would love to work with you to make sure that as we're putting information out, I see a lot of stuff that comes out from our community board in English and Spanish. I don't always see it in Mandarin or other, AAPI related languages. So I'd love to work with you, Eva, to see how just our newsletter and our postings and our information can also be translated and shared accordingly. So thank you, council member. If you email me, I can then follow up with the communications team, and Eva and I can work with our CB11 staff to make sure that that happens.
That's great.
Thank you. So I do see one more question from a community member, council member. We've got one more. I believe it's Crystal Glover. Am I pronouncing it properly? Crystal Glover, who is one of our attendees. Ms. Glover, you can unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Mr. Levine, thank you for all you do.
Oh, thank you.
I want to just mention one thing real quick. When we were kids, those of us from 1959 to present who got MMRs and stuff like that, we didn't know we were getting shot, right? Our parents didn't sit us down and tell us, well, do you want the shot or not? It was given to us, okay? And so now I'm finding with this vaccine, COVID, everyone is attacking folks who don't want to get the vaccine shot. They're not being empathetic, sympathetic. They are attacking everyone from Biden down, are stabbing folks who refuse to get the vaccine, and they're not taking into consideration that we have feelings, okay? So you might want to consider that the next time you discuss this vaccine. Have a little heart. I'm not just talking about you, I'm talking about the general public, because as a human being, a lot of us are liberal or feminists or whatever we do. We don't like to be told what to do. That's number one. And so have a little heart. Let's not just be, well, you got to get it. You better go out there and get this and this and that. Come on, because you're creating an atmosphere that's not cool. Can I just say one more thing to what was her name? Or Cindy?
Ms. Glover, can I just ask, is it a question
Okay.
or a comment? Because right now we're in the question portion of our.
And I just wanted Mr. Levine to know, to take to his constituents, that in the future, have a little heart. This is America. We want to have all these rights, the right to do this, the right to do that. Let's consider that we are dealing with human beings, and people are a little frustrated. We're in a pandemic. People are scared. They're hearing, they're doing their research on the vaccine, and they're finding that human embryos is in it. They're being told, and all this kind of thing here. So of course people are scared. You got blacks who are looking at this Tuskegee experiment and all this kind of thing that's going on. So just keep in mind that it's not that people. I'm gonna shut up. Just keep in mind.
I wouldn't use that term. I just want to make sure that we stay on time and on schedule.
Just keep in mind that people are not doing.
I'll just very quickly.
I think it's very important
Thank you.
to share and make sure that we are speaking to our different populations. I'm going to put you back on mute. I'm going to give the council member a brief moment to
very
respond, and then we're going to move on.
First of all, Ms. Glover, I so appreciate all your leadership for Washington Houses in East Harlem, and really value everything you have done and continue to do for the community. And I appreciate you speaking from the heart on this. And you are absolutely right that we have to treat everyone with empathy, with compassion, and understand that there has been generations of history of racism and neglect in the American medical system that can't be ignored. And then of course it impacts people's trust going forward. I will say, in case there was any doubt, there's no embryos in the COVID vaccines or used in the creation of COVID vaccines. So that is not a concern. These are phenomenally safe vaccines, safer than aspirin. No medication or treatment is perfectly, completely safe, but I think most of us are okay taking aspirin, and COVID vaccines are likewise extremely safe. But we need to treat everyone with compassion and empathy and hear them out and answer questions, and elevate trusted voices in the communities, doctors, medical experts from the community, who really have the credibility to spread these messages. So I appreciate you, Ms. Glover, appreciate you raising these points. And I'm certainly going to continue to listen and to share information as best I can for all our benefit so that we can protect our communities and finally get beyond this horrible pandemic.
And that we have the information we need for ourselves and our family members and our communities. I'm going to recognize Pastor Isaac Scott, who's a member of our community board, and then that will be the last one on this item. Isaac, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Really quickly, I just wanted to just thank Ms. Glover for raising those concerns. Mr. Levine, I'm vaccinated as well, but I do share a lot of her same concerns with the sort of bullying tactics and not really caring enough for why people are concerned about the vaccine. And if your office could possibly maybe even work with Ms. Glover to figure out strategies and ways in which you can reach folks who are very skeptical about the vaccine, or just being able to provide more information to communities like Naya just said. So I think there is, without us just like sort of saying the norm and sort of breezing over that, it would be good if we sort of looked into that a little more in what she's saying, because I'm vaccinated, my whole household is vaccinated, but I have very close friends and associates who share valid concerns, and I think that goes a long way to us really being able to reach everybody and not leaving anybody behind. So I'll just stop there.
I'm going to ask the council member, and I know some of this, I just want to say to everyone, some of this also lends just the brevity of time that we associate with our presenters. So I don't want anyone to ever mistake kind of getting to the heart and making sure we hit the highlights with us being heartless about this particular topic or situation. So I want to thank the council member for trying to squeeze a ton of information into a certain allocated amount of time. We didn't have the member from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene come, so I allowed the council member to speak at a greater length to make sure we touched on all the points. But I also want to recommend two things. One, that the council member has an amazing Twitter page. I think it's pure fire around COVID and our health information. And I mean fire in a good way of timely addressing and putting out ideas and information to help us stay informed. So if anyone is on social media, I highly recommend that the council member drop his Twitter handle in when he shares his information so that you can follow. And then I would also ask the council member in his role as health chair to please share with us as a follow-up to this some of your key pieces of information that you share. So if there's a myth busting sheet, I mean, this was created by an African-American woman doctor, so I think that that's always something that when people hear that opens their ears to at least have a different conversation. And so if there's any documentation sheets, flyers from the city, from the state, from other groups, I know we have members of the health committee on, from the Department of Health, in our community. But if there are ways that we can share that information and put that in the hands of our members of our Health and Human Services Committee and CB11 board members broadly, then I think that, we can then, as you said, be trusted messengers and ambassadors to share that. And that's really how we get to move people forward. I have people on this call with us today who were hesitant, who after multiple conversations moved forward with it. And so I think that it's important that we keep time and we move everything forward by having conversations. So I thank everyone. Council member, I'm going to close out. Is there anything else you would like to share before we move forward?
I think you got it. Such a great opportunity to chat with all of you. Every one of the questions and comments was great. And I won't get into politics here, but if all goes well, I will be representing the entire borough of Manhattan come January. And so I get to work with all of you, my friends in CB11, in a whole new capacity, and really look forward to that. Still chairing the health committee between now and December. So if I can be helpful in that capacity, of course, I'm here as well. So thank you, Madam Chair, and to all of you here on the CB11 Human Services Committee for having me on.
And I know that you yourself have had COVID, so I appreciate you, that this is personal. This is personal to you.
My wife had a pretty serious case. The kids had mild cases. So, this is real. And if anyone tells you it's just like the flu, let me tell you, this is way worse than the flu. You do not want anyone you know or care about to get a serious case of COVID. And so let's remember at all times, our first priority is keeping people safe.
Yeah, amen. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you lending your time for your thoroughness. And I know that you'll follow up with information in the chat and additional
will.
information to our CB11 board. I'm going to move this forward. So Marlene, do you mind advancing the slide? So before we move forward again, I just want to stay on time with this. I did realize after I tried to reach Padmore John that he does have a colleague on the line with us that I did not see before. And so I am going to ask, it looks like there's Yumi is on the line, is with us from the Department of Health, who can help with translating information, particularly from Mandarin and Cantonese. So thank you, Yumi. And it looks like we have, is it Jaime Gutierrez from the Department of Health? Jaime and Yumi, I feel like Mr. Levine has covered a lot of stuff, but what I would love to have each of you do is just come on very briefly to introduce yourselves and share your contact information with us for any additional comment and or questions. So I'm going to first call on Yumi, if you'd like to unmute and just say hello, and then I'll call on Jaime. Is Yumi still with us?
Yumi, you may speak. You're unmuted on this end.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. So I actually have been working with Ms. Pierre on a East 125th Street solutions committee where we're trying to figure out how we can move the homeless folks on the streets into better conditions, particularly, during the daytime. And we understand there's been a lot of health concerns with defecation and what have you. But I'm specifically with the Department of Health in the Bureau of Mental Health, and we would like to do a presentation at some point for this.
I would love for you to come back,
committee.
Yumi, for our October meeting so that we can stay on schedule for today. So I'm happy to have you as part of our support team as we address the quality of life issues and mental health and overall health and wellness issues on the East 125th Street corridor. Thank you so much for that work. And I am going to ask Marlene to be in touch with you to schedule you to present at our meeting next month. I'm now going to turn it over to, is it Jaime Gutierrez? Is Jaime here? I saw Jaime had his hand raised. Jaime, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So I'll keep it brief since I know we're
It seems like you went back on mute, Mr. Gutierrez. If you could unmute yourself again.
Yeah, can you hear me?
You said you were going to keep it brief and then that was it.
Period. So yes. So just very quickly, so I'm the acting action center manager at the East Harlem location. I also am the vaccination site lead. We continue to provide vaccines in the East Harlem Action Center. We are giving Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, and if requested, we do have Moderna, but we're not really advertising it so much for a number of different reasons. We've given out about 30,000, close to 30,000 vaccinations. That's dose 1 and 2 from the 5 zip codes include 10029 and 10035 that we see coming into the building. We saw a significant increase in the number of people seeking a vaccine post the incentive and then post the mandated city policy for New York City employees. Yeah, we continue to provide vaccinations for the community.
And when are you guys open again, if you can remind us times and hours?
It's 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday.
Great. And are you also doing testing at the site or just vaccination?
We just vaccines. We do have a test truck that comes on Thursdays to test, but yes, we're a vaccination site.
And what about flu shots?
Flu shots, we're not giving flu shots. And in part because the COVID-19, there are so many protective layers to actually getting a vaccine administered that introducing a flu shot would be a logistical nightmare. And that's
Understood. Just wanted to make sure because I know some sites are offering all three, some sites are offering one or the other. So I just saw testing van on 120th and 5th Avenue this afternoon. So just would like to make sure what's being offered where. If you could please put your information in the chat for everyone, not just the panelists, to Yumi and Jaime, I would greatly appreciate it. Marlene, I'm now going to turn this section over to you, and I thank everyone who participated in our conversations and updates regarding the health and portion of this section. Marlene, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nye. So good evening, everyone. I'm the Community Associate and the staff liaison for this Human Services Committee. And just to committee members, as you all remember, before your session closed, the Assistant District Manager for CB11, Carly Wine, did create a work plan for the budget process, just to make the process just a little bit more comprehensive. And she laid out what the board should be doing each month. This month will not be a discussion of budget requests as was customary in the past. This month is strictly focused on the public input survey and the results of that survey. So just give me a second. I'm going to pull up the presentation and then I'll begin. Okay, this might be a little lengthy, so just bear with me. I appreciate your patience in advance. I won't speed read. I know, Nye, you want to keep time. But just
No, this is too important. I mean, please do what you need to do. I asked all of the members of the committee and the members of the public to please bear with us. How funds are allocated and resources are allocated to our community to address our health and human services needs is crucial. So Marlene, please do what you need.
Okay, thank you very much. So just to follow the agenda, I'll start with a very brief overview of the survey's role in the larger budget process and establish the goals for tonight's presentation and discussion. Then I'll get into the survey results relating to healthcare and human services. Then we'll conclude with a discussion about the results and next steps. And then I'm asking you to please reserve your questions and comments until the discussing section. I appreciate it in advance. So for newer board members, I'm just going to reiterate what I said before I open this presentation. So for newer board members and meeting attendees who might not be familiar with the city's budget process, community boards are given a broad range of responsibilities for advising the city about local budget needs and priorities. Those interested in learning more about CB11's role in the budget process are encouraged to attend our district needs and budget committee meetings. By the way, the next district need and budget committee meeting will be held on the 30th of this month. That's next week. The public input survey is part of CB11's larger community engagement strategy for the annual statement of district needs and budget requests. This year, we collected survey responses over a time period of 2 months and received a total of 135 responses, which is wonderful because in 2020, there were only 77 responses. So there has been progress made. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to review the public input related to the work of this committee. We also hope that committee members will engage with the input by providing feedback and making recommendations for additions, revisions, or even the removal of content for our statement of district needs. It's important to note that public input is only one contributing factor in the community board's needs assessment. We will also take our previous positions and the budget consultations with city agencies into account when drafting the final statement of district needs. Survey participants were asked to select the most important issue relating to healthcare and human services. The most commonly selected answer was mental health and substance abuse treatment and prevention programs. Services to reduce or prevent homelessness and supportive housing were close behind. Access to healthy food and lifestyle programs and environmental health issues also received a significant number of votes. These are direct quotes from your neighbors who flagged mental health and substance abuse treatment and prevention programs as an important issue. I'll just leave this slide up so you all can read it. There were a lot of responses regarding the prevalence of mental health and substance use issues in our district. Some respondents emphasized the impact mental health has on educational attainment, income, and homelessness, and the need for more effective services to support those struggling. These respondents spoke of the stigma involved in discussions around mental health and addiction. Other respondents focused on the negative impact of these issues on our street conditions and public safety along 125th Street and at our subway stations. Many respondents attribute the prevalence of mental health and substance use issues to the concentration of treatment facilities in the neighborhood. They would like to see fair share practices in place that would more equitably distribute programs across the city. Additionally, they'd like the treatment facilities in our district to service primarily residents from the Harlem neighborhoods. There were other respondents that were accepting of harm reduction programs, such as methadone clinics and safe injection facilities, but emphasized the need for better follow-up with clients. Finally, a number of respondents expressed that the conversation around mental health has been overshadowed by substance use issues. They made a distinction between drug treatment services and mental health services and emphasized the need for latter, especially for our youth. These respondents would like to see more mental health practitioners in schools. Homelessness is another major concern reflected in the inputs. Homelessness has a significant negative impact on the physical, mental, social, financial well-being of individuals and families. Respondents identified a number of solutions and services to prevent homelessness, including supportive housing for seniors and other vulnerable populations, affordable housing, rent assistance programs, and legal protections against eviction. Although prevention is key, services for the homeless are still necessary for those who slip through the cracks. Respondents expressed the need for the city to meet our homeless population where they're at and provide support through street canvassing. Income is a key social determinant of health, meaning that low-income New Yorkers are statistically more likely to experience negative health outcomes. Respondents attributed poor health outcomes in East Harlem to the high cost of healthcare, preventive care, housing, and healthy food. They also pointed out the lack of quality supermarkets in the area. Additionally, many of our low-income residents are NYCHA residents or are living in privately owned yet poor maintained housing developments. They reported the presence of mold, asbestos, and rodents in their living spaces. Respondents indicated the need for support for tenants needing repairs in their units. Some responses highlighted the need to prioritize our seniors as our population ages. Respondents raised fear of displacement and elder abuse. Increased affordable housing and assisted living developments for seniors would quiet the fear of displacement. Additionally, existing services for seniors often prevent elder abuse. However, better outreach is needed to ensure services are reaching those who need it. Finally, some respondents indicated that senior centers in our district could do a better job at connecting seniors with needed services and technological supports. COVID-19 still presents a threat, and many respondents emphasize the need for an educational campaign targeting the mask mandate and vaccine hesitancy. They mentioned the disparate health and economic impacts of COVID-19 on East Harlem's residents and businesses. Additionally, respondents emphasized the importance of prioritizing preventive healthcare over reactive healthcare, pointing to a need for affordable healthcare and healthy food and lifestyle programs. There were also responses about the need to increase wages for healthcare and human services workers to decrease turnover. The Environment, Open Space and Parks Committee oversees the conversation about the environmental justice. However, it's worth noting the impact that our district's environmental concerns have on our residents. East Harlem residents have higher rates of asthma and respiratory issues than other neighborhoods due to poor air quality and poor condition of our housing stock. A lot of respondents also mentioned the prevalence of rodents in the district and the need for better pest control. Again, this issue is addressed by the Environment, Open Space, and Parks Committee. Before we move to the next steps, I'd like to ask for some feedback from the committee about these results. So the first question being asked that you can read on the screen is, do you agree that mental health and substance abuse treatment and prevention programs is the most important issue related to this policy area? Should the executive committee consider selecting a different issue to prioritize? So I'll open up the floor now.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the committee members to please raise their hands to be acknowledged. Marlene, I'm going to allow you to recognize them as they raise their hands. And again, I want you to think in terms of overall, all of the services that need to be prioritized. Is this the most important issue? So Marlene, I'll give you the floor to be able to recognize members of the Health and Human Services Committee by raised hand.
I thought I saw Eva raise her hand, but she put it down.
Eva, did you have something that you wanted to share?
No pressure, Eva. Like if you
I really just want to agree.
Okay, that's fine.
And I also agree with what Marlene said, that there's just over concentration of social services.
Can we actually get 2 of those?
In Harlem.
Marlene, are there any other hands raised?
Yeah, just to touch on what Eva said. So some residents did mention that there is an over concentration of services in East Harlem that this committee has touched on every single meeting, right? So you guys have done a good job at addressing this and trying to tackle this major issue in the district. Some residents also said that it's the substance abuse is one thing, but there's a huge mental health piece that is not being addressed. So the push is, yes, try to mitigate the overconcentration, oversaturation of these existing facilities and services in the district, but really and truly beef up the mental health piece that's not being addressed. And then you guys also touch on in this committee many times, all of last year, you touched on it, like make sure people receiving the services are coming from East Harlem. So the community did touch on that as well, but it wasn't only just the oversaturation. I'm going to call in order of the way I see the hand. So Robin, I see your hand next.
Thank you very much. I believe that there's a disconnect in two respects. Number one is, I know that there was a tragedy in East Harlem recently where a teen set his apartment on fire and then jumped to his death. He had been in a program. His parents had asked that they be kept there. He was released. We have a client whose son is in a similar situation. Every time she brings him to Mount Sinai, he's out within hours. There has to be something between treatment and mobile crisis unit that allows family members impacted by mental health to be safely housed temporarily and not sent home. The other thing I think that we need to address, and I don't know how you do it, is the stigma associated with seeking mental health help. This is still an issue in some populations, in some cultures. We see it ourselves. We started a program called Talking It Out because it sounds very friendly on the phone, and in fact it is. And before you know it, we have over 50 clients in a month's time sharing with us things that they might have shared with a more professional kind of counselor if in fact mental health services were more user-friendly. They're available, but I don't know how user-friendly that they are. Ours happens to be for free, so that's another part of the piece here. I just wanted to share those two things. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. I see Jennifer Meyer, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I think I'm echoing a bit what Robin just said, but I think definitely addressing mental health. I think when we talk about oversaturation, that sometimes tends to become a more quality of life issue for people that live in East Harlem, and the connecting of tends to be more for people that don't live in East Harlem, since they are traveling far to East Harlem to get those services. So I think the mental health piece is what maybe impacts more of our actual East Harlem community members, where there are services that they need that they're not getting. And we already know we have an abundance of substance abuse treatment centers, and that is more of a quality of life, where mental health treatment is what our community is really needing.
Thank you, Jennifer. Nye, I just see one hand. Oh, Eva. Okay, yes, Eva.
I think it's also useful to point out that our district has a high concentration of adult-only homeless shelters, not just drug treatment clinics. And some of the residents that it's brought in need more services, but it's not clear to me, first of all, that some of these residents I think should be more dispersed because we have too high of a concentration. Second of all, if these residents are brought in, if the district is allocating more resources to help them.
Right. Thank you so much, Eva. I think what would be advantageous for this committee would be, in addition to the homelessness and the adult homeless centers that exist in the district, is to see which of these homeless shelters, if any, have wraparound services. So if they have wraparound services, then the mental health piece is there. It's being addressed. So that's for a later date and more research for.
And I also want to make sure that we're putting some of these topics in the appropriate categories, and some of them overlap. So the shelter issue, which was raised by our committee previously when we were seeking to do a resolution, was transferred to the Housing Committee as opposed to the Human Services Committee. And so I do want to make sure that as we're talking about these, some of our committee members who sit on multiple committees or have, opportunities to attend the meetings of our brother and sister committees, for lack of a better term, or the other committees in our CB11 family, should make sure that they raise those questions and those concerns during the budget process of those committees, so that what we talk about here is then repeated and elevated and amplified in multiple settings, so that those items can be raised to a new level of priority. I'm going to ask Marlene to move on to the next questions.
Do you want me to recognize the attendee that had her hand raised in regard to this first question? I could move on if you would like.
I would prefer to have all of the committee members give their comments to all of the questions before we go to the public, in respect of time, if that is possible, Marlene.
No, it's fine.
So all of the questions to the committee and then all the questions to the public.
Yes,
Thank you.
I can do that. So the next question, as you can see on the screen, let me see. Okay, let me just minimize mine. I'm just gonna minimize this, sorry. So does the committee accept the public input as is for inclusion in fiscal year 2023 statement of district needs? Are there any other issues or needs that were not mentioned? I think you all covered that. And unless anyone has anything else to say.
I just have one that I don't recall being seen as heavily weighted, and that is the Health and Human Services toll on the number of students in our district who may either suffer from mental illness, be housing insecure, food insecure, etc. And so, I think we're in the top 10 as a district. And again, that might be something, so I'm going to follow my own advice that lends itself to the Housing Committee, and I will also elevate it in the Youth and Education Committee. But I do think we need to have a focus on what the impact of COVID. We have students who've lost their family members and are now on their own. And so I do think we need to have a lens as a community on our young people as well. And so I will make sure that I share that with the other committees.
Eva?
Yeah, before you move on, some of my neighbors, after they've seen this survey, they have feedback saying that they're wondering if there might be room to rephrase the question next year. The question asked, I'm just recalling, if the district needs more mental health services or drug treatment services. And it's a little bit confusing because we have sent in quite a lot of people from outside the district. They need help. So do we answer yes, or do we answer no because there are too many people already sent into the district? So we might want to separate the discussion of kind of over concentration of social services from whether we bring in just more social workers to help people who are sent into Harlem from outside of Harlem.
I also would just add to that personally, in looking at the first question, I don't think that all of those items should be one cohort, right? So mental health services is a topic, and substance abuse treatment service is a topic, and prevention services might be another topic. And so I know we are kind of, 3/4 of the way through this process, but if there's a feedback from the Health and Human Services Committee, and I'm sorry, it's a little noisy here for the moment, I would just say in the future, we may want to reconsider bundling them into one category, when in my perspective as a, healthcare professional, I believe that those are different categories that might need its own lens to each one.
Yeah, we can maybe help draft the question for next year. That might be helpful.
I will bring this back to the office.
I'm turning it back over to you, Marlene.
Yes. Good feedback, everyone. I will definitely bring your feedback back to the office. I appreciate the feedback. So this is, I believe, I'm finishing this out. So this is the conclusion of the presentation. I tried to, go as quickly as I could without losing content. So after each committee reviews the public input, the district needs and budget committee will hold a public hearing at their next meeting. The executive committee will finalize the most pressing needs for each policy area, and the staff will draft a statement of district needs. Next month, we'll be discussing budget requests to accompany our needs, and at the October full board meeting, you will vote on the final statement of district needs and budget requests. If you have any comments or concerns about the data collected or CB11 budget process, you can be directed to, as I mentioned before, our assistant district manager, Carly Wine, and her email should be on that previous slide. It's right there on the bottom of the slide. So
do you mind going one slide back,
more?
Marlene? Just one slide backwards? Nope, it was the one that talked about what's coming next in the order of stuff.
Oh, the next steps, okay. Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to remind everybody that the public hearing on community district needs will be held at the September 30th District Needs and Budget Committee meeting. So if you would like to participate in a more in-depth conversation about this topic, I invite you to go to the CB11M website and to make sure that you are registered for that September 30th District Needs and Budget Committee meeting, because we are only tapping on some of the high level points as it relates to the topics of this committee. Marlene, I'm turning it back over to you. If there's anything else that you would like to add?
No, that is it. I'm actually going to turn it back over to you. Thank you for your patience, everyone. And next month, as I mentioned, that will go into the budget request process with the Excel grid that you all are familiar with. So we'll visit that one in October.
Great. Thank you, Marlene, for that. Thank you to all the members of the board and the committees and the public who participated in that process. I think it's a very crucial process to make sure that we have more community input, that we are ever more transparent, and that we are doing all we can to improve the quality of life, health, and wellness of all of the members across our community. I'm going to give it a moment for Marlene to transition the slides so that we can see where we are on our agenda. So we are on old business. Marlene, I feel like I don't know what to do, but I've got the minutes on my phone here that I then need to share, but I have to go offline to share them with you. So what should we do at this point?
I don't want you to go offline. It's really up to your committee.
Okay.
If
Committee members, we have a few more items that we need to address. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the next speaker up. I believe we have another item. If that is okay with everyone, I don't want to skip protocol. I'd like the next speaker to go up, which would then allow me to turn off my camera briefly. And then Marlene, I actually may just have to email it to you maybe to bring up the minutes so that I can then come back online.
Okay.
Is that okay with everyone on the committee that we take the next speaker? Okay, I see heads nodding and thumbs up. So we're going to head nod and thumbs up. Marlene, I believe we have, yes, the CCHP. So everyone, I will be here. You just won't see me visually. Marlene, you have the controls. If anything, I'd like to call up our next speaker. I want to give this some context since I might be removed for a moment while I email this information to Marlene for the minutes to be voted on. CCHP, as everyone will remember, it's the Center for Comprehensive Health Practice. Is a long-standing member of the community, so I do not want to revisit the previous presentation, but they have come to us asking a request of a letter of support to extend their current lease. And again, I just want to give this context. They are moving out of Metropolitan Hospital into a new space. We asked them to please be in touch with us as their progress was made in their new space because there were very much concerns about whether or not they would be thinking to relocate in the East 125th Street corridor. I believe that they have found a space in East Harlem that is not on the East 125th Street corridor, but due to some construction timelines, they need to revisit with us to ask for an additional extension or support for an extension. in their current space until the new space is ready. I want to first say as chair and recognize that CCHP has been very communicative with us during this process, checking in with both myself and the CB11 staff and the executive board as they move forward, and has heeded our conversations and advice and been very transparent. So I want to turn the floor over. Who is presenting? Is Michelle presenting? Who's presenting from? Hi, Michelle, how are you?
Hi, how are
Thank
you?
I'm
Yeah,
going to go off
thanks for having
screen
me.
momentarily, but I still will be
Oh.
able to hear. And
Great.
so, Marlene, is there anything else that we need to share before I queue up Michelle?
Can
No,
I share my screen?
yes, I'll stop here, Sharon, sure.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to be listening, guys, but I will be off screen for a moment. Michelle, the floor is yours. Marlene is there to
Okay,
assist you with
thank
anything.
you. Great. So, just gonna please for this. Everyone can see my screen? So thanks everyone. Thank you to the Health and Human Services Committee for inviting us back. So just sort of a recap. So my name is Michelle Godot. I'm the Senior Director of Planning and External Affairs. And I'm just gonna do this really briefly because I know you guys, there's a lot more stuff on your agenda. So, you know, I'm just gonna quickly review or just kind of a quick refresher of some of our services in case there's anybody new on this call. I'm gonna give you an update about our relocation of services. You know, if anyone has any questions about our move, about CCHP, and then, you know, we'll go through what our request is to CB11. So just really quickly, just a reminder. So as I said, we have been in the community for over 60 years. We are very much patient-centered and family-focused. In our clinic right now, it's closed due to COVID, but we normally offer free on-site childcare for all of our patients when they're getting services. And as I know that, you know, serving patients in the community is very important. And over half of our patients that are getting services at CCHP live in East Harlem. And we really focus on a preventative model. And, you know, we really take to heart that we've been called a good neighbor by CB11 because it's very important to us to make sure that we continue that close relationship. And so we serve a little bit less than 3,000 patients a year. That was in 2020. We did a lot of services through telehealth once COVID hit, and still are providing a good chunk of our counseling services and some primary care as well through telehealth. But we've seen, especially for medical, more of our patients prefer to see the doctors in person. And, you know, just to sort of so that most of our patients are getting primary care services with us, and over a third of them are getting some sort of integration of care as well. And so just to sort of remind everyone, we do a little bit of what we say everything. I don't love to use this word, but we kind of like to say we're a one-stop shop where you can come in, you can get your primary care, get your counseling, get your mental health, get, you know, if you want to do pediatrics, care for women's health, sort of a little bit of everything with us. So sort of where we are and what's been happening with CCHP. So we, in December of 2020, were notified by Metropolitan Hospital about our need to relocate. We did have a lease that was going to be ending at the end of 2021. We were unsure yet if we were going to do an extension to stay for another 5 years, or we were going to move in. They originally asked us to leave earlier this year, but as things take a long time, we've been granted extensions to stay at the hospital. So right away, you know, our team at CCHP hired, you know, realtors, talked to agencies, and started talking to CB11 as well about, do we stay in East Harlem or do we not stay here? And we were, you know, we presented at the committee meeting here, and everyone here voted to write a letter of support for us, which we were really honored to have. And also in that time of February of 2021, we actually identified what we hope to be our new site for CCHP. And so just to sort of show the timeline, that in February when we identified the site and to how long it took to sign the lease, is really showing why we're asking for an extension to stay here. In the meantime, in June, so before, if anyone who's unfamiliar with CCHP, we are located inside Metropolitan Hospital, and we rented 2 floors on the mental health building. And we were told that they were looking to take back the 9th floor to start opening up some other services there. So to sort of coordinate with them, we decided to move up all of our services out of the 9th floor and consolidate into the 12th floor. And that we did in coordination with the Department of Health and with New York State Office of OASIS as well. In July, we actually were awarded capital funding from the Manhattan Borough President Office. So once we move, we will actually have brand new furniture because a lot of our furniture is very, very old. We like to keep things for as long as we possibly can. And then in August was when we actually signed our lease. So that's when I say we started in February, when we first identified our space, and then it took us until August to sign the lease. And so our new location, and we very much, appreciated the feedback that we were getting from community members requesting that we do everything we can to avoid 125th. And we did just that. Even though there's lots of space there, we really worked hard and pushed our realtor to say that we will not go to 125th Street because we know the community has requested us to not move there. So our new location is 35 East 110th Street. It's where, so it's right above the park. We're going to be renting the 4th floor. It's where Northside Center used to be located. And one of the things that came up, and this is why our biggest concern is, right before we were set to sign our lease, our new landlords had told us that they need to build a new elevator. They had all this time, they didn't do it before. We don't know why. So they told us it could take up to a year because of labor and parts and everything is delayed from August. They're hoping perhaps sooner, sometime in June or July, but that we need to prepare ourselves that we might not be able to actually move into our new location until next summer. We're set to begin our demolition of the space the next couple of weeks. And our biggest concern is that our present lease with Metropolitan is set to expire in December of 2021, and that we need to discuss with them an extension for a year. And we have every intention. We've already spoken with the Manhattan Borough President Office, who's actually spoken to the president on our behalf of Metropolitan Hospital. But because we wanted to show the hospital that we have made efforts to move within their requested timeline, but also to show them that having us move out while we're still in the process of building a new space could impact the community, impact our patients that are mainly living here. I'm sorry. So that's sort of where we are. So why we're here, we spoke with Nye, we spoke with Marlene, we had talks with Nilsa of coming to the community board. We've gotten support from Diana Ayala's office, from Manhattan Borough President, but for us, it's really important that CB11 supports us as well in every decision we make for this neighborhood and for the community. So we're just asking, when we go to the hospital, that the community board supports us in our request to stay one more year if needed on the 12th floor of the mental health building. And yeah, that was really it. I tried to do this quickly. Is there questions, anything I can answer from anyone that's come up?
I just want to re-highlight 3 things. One was that, in terms of the fact that your organization provides a host of services, not just one service, was something that, we were very much, conscientious about sharing with the community in your previous presentation, because we might have people on the phone, including new committee members and those members of the public who may not be as familiar with your organization. Secondly, as was stated, that it is a longstanding organization that has always had a good relationship with both the community, with those that they treat, with the hospital. You guys have been at Metropolitan Hospital for many years. I don't think Metropolitan would have you as a recurring tenant all that time. If there was any causes or concerns with the services or the interaction with your clientele, with their interaction with the community by extension. And just to say that this is the type of of relationship, for lack of a better term, or should I say dialogue. This is the type of dialogue that we would like to have with service providers in the community, where we are constantly in communication, where we're understanding what the process is, where we can support you in being thoughtful about how this transition impacts your patients and their families who get, again, not just one service, but many services from you and are members of our community, and that you've done a diligent job of keeping us informed, but also trying to stay within the community and, took into account, the concerns we had about not oversaturating further the 125th Street issue. So I just say that to say that this is a unique situation in that because of COVID and construction and other issues has put you in this predicament. It wasn't something that could have been foreseen prior. And so, CCHP is coming to the community board vis-a-vis our committee first to ask for a letter of support for their request to extend their current temporary placement, really current lease, but on a temporary basis until they can move in. And just wanted to let everybody know that the 1-year time frame isn't necessarily what's set. This could happen sooner. This could happen sooner, but with construction, anyone who's ever worked with contractors or construction, and also approvals from state and local and other agencies, there's a myriad of factors to be considered. And so I would, Marlene, I guess, do I need to make a motion for this to come to a vote? Would that be correct? Since this is a unique situation? Okay.
Yes, so call for a motion.
Yeah, so I'd like to call for a motion regarding this letter of support. So I would like to call for a motion, I guess, in support of a letter of support. Kind of sounds redundant.
Yeah, I'll just bring up the.
Yeah, I want to make sure we read it properly. So hang on one second, Michelle. I want to just go back to the slides, because I know we switched the screen share. So I'd like to call for a motion to support CCHP's request for a letter of support to extend CCHP's lease at Metropolitan Hospital by 1 year from January 1.
I think 2020.
Does that make sense? January 1, 2021 to December?
I think it's 2022.
Yeah, so I would think it's January 1, 2022. It looks like a typo, so I just want to call for that correction.
Yes, it's a typo. I apologize.
Yep, January 1, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. And I see that Robin's hand is raised. Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that CCHP is in fact a destination healthcare organization for so many East Harlem residents. And therefore I move that our committee provide a letter of support requesting Metropolitan Hospital extend their lease for 1 year for the year of 2022.
And is there a second? I see Pastor Isaac Scott.
Yes, I second that.
And Marlene, do we have to do a roll call vote on this one?
Yes. If you
So
don't.
Marlene, I'll turn it over to you for a roll call vote. The motion was made by Robin, seconded by Isaac, and now I turn it over to you.
Okay. Eva Chan,
No.
Osendi Garcia. Robin Krinsky. Patricia Martin.
Yes.
Thank you. Jennifer Meyer.
Yes.
Shirley Pena. Oh, she's out. I'm sorry. Arturo Perez.
Yes.
Xavier Santiago.
Aye.
Isaac, I know you seconded, but I still have to call on you. Isaac Scott.
Yes.
Thank you. Robin, I know you made it, but I still have to call on you for arbitration.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me just tally this because you guys lost some people.
And I know that there are new members that weren't here on the first conversation or go around because this is a rollover from the previous cycle.
Right. I just wanted to make sure you guys still have quorum. You still do, and the motion carries.
Okay. Thank you, Marlene. Yeah, it looks like we've lost some people. Marlene, thank you everyone for this. As I said, I know it must be difficult for, thank you, Robin Krinsky is just putting in the comments that she voted yes. She wasn't sure if you heard her. Thank you to the new
I
members.
didn't. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you to the new members for your vote on this, as I know that this is a holdover from previous. Thank you to the continuing members who voted on this. As I said, I believe that CCHP has been a solid partner, and I hope that they will continue to be, and hopefully the construction ferries will make this happen sooner. But we need to make sure that our community's services are not interrupted in the process. So thank you all. Michelle, can you please keep us informed as you have been? If you can continue, if there's any updates on the status or change, please be sure to be in touch with our CB11 staff so that we can continue the dialogue. Thank you.
I will, definitely. Thank you very much for all your support. It really means a lot to us.
Thank you. Marlene, I'm going to ask you to advance the slides.
You're done for the items on the agenda, but this is where the second roll call will go.
Yeah, the old business though, I did email you the minutes if we need to pull that back up for vote.
Oh, right. Okay, I'm sorry. So just
no, it's okay. I know you were presenting and controlling the slides, so I didn't know if you saw that I did send those over.
I didn't. Okay, so then
I think that June meeting was one of the shortest meetings we've had in the cycle, so the minutes are really brief. And I had put in the chat earlier, thank you everyone for your patience. I know this is the first meeting of the new season, and so it does tend to go a little bit longer as we get everyone back up to speed. And
I'm just going to
that,
keep it, sorry, I'm just going to keep the minutes like this and not down. I was just going to change
that's fine.
too much.
Of course. So as you can see, it's marked draft until we vote on it. It'll be edited. It identifies who was present, just kind of going over again for some of the new members, what announcements were made, what informational updates. And so for the newer members, every month that we meet, we have invited DOH, MH, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to give us a presentation, as well as New York City's Vax for All and Test and Trace services. So you will see that pretty much on a monthly basis. Do know that that often takes up a certain portion of our meeting time. We try to keep them, as to time as possible and to schedule. But given, the current state of COVID, those can be lengthy conversations. Also recognizing, Noelle Arcea, who was here from Metropolitan, and our new vice chair, Arturo Perez, who is from Borican. There was an update on the Marion Sims statue, and we've asked them to continue to keep us updated about that, but we actually have switched that particular presentation to a different committee for the letters of support and moving forward. And then there was information from the Cayuga Centers. If you're not familiar, but the Cayuga Centers is a center for vulnerable individuals, mainly youth who are in foster care, who had received a large portion of unidentified children from the border. And we've been in contact with them because they are seeking families for placement. And so, Marlene, do we need to do this by roll call as well to approve the minutes from the June meeting?
No, if there are no objections, it's unanimous.
Okay. So if there are no objections, I would like to enter these meetings onto the record from June. If there is an objection, you can please raise your hand. Eva, please go ahead.
No, it's not objection, but Noel has a question for you.
Who has a question?
Noel from Metropolitan Hospital.
Yeah, no, Noel, is that the typo on your last name? I think there's a typo on Noel's last name that I need to fix. Oh, public session. Noel, if you give us 1 minute to get through this, we move some stuff around. We will be happy to have a few minutes for updates. Doesn't look like there's any objections, Marlene. So I would like to enter these minutes into the record.
Okay.
And I'm going to entertain Marlene 5 minutes because I don't think that like announcements and updates were fully given the time that they needed at the beginning. So Noel, if you'd like to have an update, and if there's anybody else who wants to briefly raise their hand for any updates or announcements, we can do that momentarily. So Noel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'll be
And
brief.
can you, Noel, it's ALICEA?
That's correct.
Perfect. We'll make that edit to the minutes.
I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the new members. Noel Alicea from Metropolitan Hospital. A few quick things. We continue to offer vaccine at no charge, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Saturdays from 8 to 3. We also continue to provide testing, PCR testing, which meets the standard that a lot of places have for their requirements. Our vaccine center is open Monday through Saturday from 8 to 4. Again, there's no charge to the person being tested. I wanted to mention specifically about treatment. We also offer monoclonal antibody treatment. That's a specific treatment that's available to people who have tested positive for COVID and have certain symptoms. It has proven to be pretty effective for people if they're caught early enough. There are some specific guidelines for that have to be met in order to qualify for the treatment. The hospital is a site that's participating in the $100 vaccine incentive for people who are getting their first dose. Unfortunately, that is not retroactive. I have asked, but it is not retroactive. But anybody coming in for a first dose is eligible to get a $100 incentive. And those were the big things I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And to all of the current members and the new members, normally I call on Noel at the beginning during our COVID updates. So Noel, I didn't see you on my screen prior to, so please forgive the oversight. Thank you, Eva, for bringing that to my attention. Arturo, is there anything else from the Borican section that you wanted to add at this time? I usually have both of you.
Yeah, well, here at Puerto Rican Neighborhood Health Center, I mean, we're still doing the vaccination. I mean, we continue to do COVID testing, but it's mostly for patients or by appointment. We used to have long lines for COVID testing. That's no longer the case, but we are continuing to do vaccinations on a regular basis every single day. Well, not every single day, but Monday through Saturday, generally between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m.
Thank you, and I appreciate both of you staying to the end to give those updates as we try to accommodate the council member's schedule. So I appreciate you both. Were there any other announcements or updates? I believe, Robin, as a new member, you had your hand up very early on. Did you have an announcement or an update? If it's a question, you're more than welcome to be in touch with me afterwards. And I'm happy to kind of get you up to speed on the committee and any other issues. Robin K, excuse me, did you have an update or an announcement?
Yes, thank you for recognizing me, and I'm very sorry that I didn't follow the order.
It's okay.
Was kind of multitasking. So there's several issues I wanted to bring to this committee. The first is that I am sure that everyone is well aware of the federal mandate on vaccinations, which needs to go into effect on the 27th for New York, that all healthcare providers must be vaccinated or have at least one dose of a vaccine. The second issue is that there is an impending 1199 strike. They took a strike vote, and their contract is not settled by October 1st. They will go on strike. They're in very heated negotiations, and they're negotiating every single day to avoid this. I'm bringing this to this committee because both of these create a public health crisis in New York. Many of you are also aware from the media that there's a labor shortage. We are losing healthcare personnel because they refuse to get vaccinated for whatever their reasons are. And I would like this committee to send a letter to the hospitals that are in the district, both private and public, to find out what their contingency plan is if either the deadline for the vaccinations does not move, further out to maybe October or November, like the federal employees have to be vaccinated by mid-November. And if there is an 1199 strike, these are very crippling events. The 1199 strike is of the 5 boroughs, not just Manhattan. So it's a huge potential for a public health crisis or disaster within New York. So that is my ask. And it's also me trying to fill you in on what's going on right now. Additionally, you should also know that the turnover of staff because of contracts for staff out of New York are very high in salary. So we see a lot of very educated and seasoned healthcare providers leaving their jobs and creating that void in having senior providers training junior providers. And the reason for that is just financial and also a lot of burnout within organizations. So I wanted the committee to be aware of this. And I also, the ask is really to survey these hospitals and find out what a contingency plan is for loss of personnel from not being vaccinated, and also the impending 1199 strike. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, for bringing that to our attention. I'm also going to take a point of chair's privilege to convene with our Economic Development Committee, which meets tomorrow, which I'm also a member of, because some of that employment strikes, employment issues also impact that area, to see what we can do to work together to address those. So I will plan to circle back with you on that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention and sharing it with us. I'm going to call on Robin S. now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know that whenever we talk about budget needs, I always bring up a need for more home care. Specifically, ISEP, there's always a waiting list for Medicare patients who qualify for that benefit. But in the past 3 months, we have had numerous patients, clients, having to go back into rehab because their provider of home care did not have enough home care workers to meet their needs. I think this is a very dangerous situation. So in many cases, these were bedbound people, not simply homebound, but bedbound, who really require 24-hour care. So if their care is entrusted to an agency that's not meeting their needs, the only solution is to go back to a safe place, such as a rehab. But our council member, Diana Ayala, is aware of this. I wanted to make the committee aware of it as well.
Thank you so much, Robin. And I also was writing about nursing home capacity, which I think is something we should probably also be checking on, given that, again, loved ones may have passed during COVID. There may be other constraints on families and community members. And so something else that we should be looking into. So thank you for bringing all of that to our attention. I see Eva Chan's hand is raised, and I don't see anyone else. So after Eva, we will then plan to close out. Eva?
Yes, I have a question about the moratorium of social services that was passed last year. And it lasts for 1 year. And also it was one with the reduced scope. So I just want to understand what is the plan related to that.
Plan is that this is our first meeting back. And so my understanding is, and I can defer to Xavier if he's still here, but that there's an assessment going on of some of the key issues. And once that assessment is completed, we'll have an update on where to revisit. But I do not think that it's ready to come to the floor just yet. This is the first meeting since we, left for the summer, much of which of the summer, issues, I think, are just coming to the forefront. Budgets just being passed in terms of, New York City, New York State elections that have taken place, with the new one coming up in November that will change many of the leadership and or priorities. So I don't think we'll be able to revisit it probably to the November agenda, if not later than that. Xavier, I know you've been sitting on some of our committees addressing issues, across the district. I don't know if that's a fair representation of where I think we stand in terms of, timing to revisit. Xavier, I see your hand is raised. I'm going to call on you. Xavier, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. This committee was last charged, and upon my last review of notes, to create a questionnaire, which was already a work in progress, and then to call in those providers and schedule, like to reach out to them to start scheduling and see who would be willing to come before us, and then submitting the questionnaire. I think that's the last port of call for responsibility upon this committee.
We might have
and
lost
that's,
you. Oh, can you come back? Yeah.
no, I'm right here.
Xavier,
right
we
here.
lost you briefly. Okay.
No, I'm here. So what I was saying is that the committee's last responsibility was to reach out to the providers to see who would be willing to come and present to the committee. And the committee was, I think, working on a questionnaire to submit to those willing facilities or establishments. So that's where it was. That was on us as a committee. I don't know where that was last left at this point in time, but as a summary, that was what we were supposed to be doing while ongoing meetings were happening throughout Upper Manhattan on various groups that we sit on. So that last I heard, that is that the questionnaire was being worked on.
Yep.
And that we need to start reaching out to those providers to see who are willing to come and present. We have good providers like CCHP, and I think we need to find out who are those amongst us that are unwilling to present. So I think that's what I would recommend as the next steps for this committee, is to get that list collated. There should be one on file, and then to start reaching out. That's something we can do in the meantime. We'll know very quickly whether or not they want to come present. If they don't, we kind of know where they stand. And if they do, then we can present the questionnaire. So
just
that
to
is
update
my
everyone.
recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Xavier. To update everyone, the questionnaire was submitted to the CB11 district staff. The staff has made their comments and edits to it. It now then needs to be finalized and reviewed by the executive committee and myself to get to a point where it could then be used as a tool with this interaction. Marlene and I have had a discussion about groups to invite, some of which have gotten back to us, some of which have not. Queued up for October. I've already invited Yumi to come and present about what's going on East 125th Street from that organization side of new activity and a new project that's going on related to that. And then Marlene and I have spoken about other speakers queued up for the remainder of this year and then going into next year. So on the October meeting, there'll be an update related to that. Thanks. Ms. Glover, I see your hand is up. Is there a question? Because we're closed for comments. Is there a question that you would like to ask?
First of all, thank you very much. Your report was very good. It was full. I come to these meetings because I want to know what's going on. I live in Harlem. You won't know anything. It's like a tumbleweed blowing in the wind, as I always say. It's so sad. And that's why I come. But I wanted to mention that kid that set the kitchen on fire and jumped out the window. That's East River Houses. They have a SCAN program over there. He was 18 years old. So that SCAN program, I think they facilitate kids from maybe 7 to 19 or something. The problem is the tenant association, from what I was told by a tenant that's in total distress, just the other day I met her. She says they haven't been having meetings. I understand with the COVID and whatnot, it closed down the city and so forth, but things are opening up. Washington Houses Community Center, which is SCAN as well, is open and is brand new. So you might want to consider all that I'm saying in your draft for 2023, 24. I just wanted to say that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Glover. Just so that you know, I'm born and raised in Washington Houses, 1875 3rd Avenue.
I wasn't. I'm not. I'm a Central Harlem girl.
Yeah, and my family's still there. So near and dear to my heart, what happened over in East River, and also just what's going on in general with our young people. Just so that you know, I also raised it with David Giordano, who's chair of our Youth and Education Committee. And so we'll await their input and comments on the report before adding anything else from our side. But thank you for bringing that up, both to you and to Robin S. And also the family that was recently displaced by the fire. You know, there are many needs across our district. That was 20 families that were impacted by that. And so, you know, as we need to keep a lens on everything we can do in every way to be supportive, you know, not just for COVID, but beyond. And so thank you for that. Okay, seeing no other hands raised, I first of all want to thank everybody. As I said, it's the first meeting back. Please don't think that we've dropped the ball or that there's, you know, items that we haven't spoken about yet. We are just trying to pace ourselves for all of the work we do and the many months we have ahead and days. So I invite you all back to be with us next month for the October meeting. I don't have it in front of me. Marlene, what is the next date for the October meeting? Because I know we moved some dates around this month because of holidays, and we'll move probably next month because of holidays.
It's the second Monday of the month, so I have to look at the date.
I think the second Monday is Columbus Day. I think that's what it's called.
It will be
Indigenous
probably the
Peoples
week
Day,
after.
but please check the CB11M calendar on our website for any changes. That's where the latest information will be, as well as the agenda. So I'm going to call for an adjournment. Do you have to do that by roll call?
No, what needs to happen now, just as I know who's here, should still be here because you guys went to a vote for CCHP, but the procedure is after new business, you call the roll again.
Okay, so we are going to call the roll.
Yes.
Again.
Eva Chan. Eva Chan.
Eva, we need you to.
Present.
Thank you. Cindy Garcia. Robin Krinsky. Robin Krinsky.
Present.
Thank you. Patricia Martin.
Spray something orange.
Present.
Lemon. Jennifer Meyer.
Here.
See it? You see it?
Don't need to see it.
Thank you.
Smell.
Someone seems to be off mute, so if you could just please be mindful of keeping yourself on mute unless your name is being called and you're responding to something. Thank you.
Shirley Pena. Xavier Santiago.
Present.
Thanks. Isaac Scott.
Present.
Thanks.
Old person.
Administration.
Yes, ma'am. Present.
Thank you. And Nye Whitaker.
Present. So I'd like to then call
Yes,
for
go
an
ahead.
adjournment. And can that be done without objection? Is that possible, Marlene?
Yes, it could be unanimous. You don't have to call for it.
Great. So I'd like to call for an adjournment by unanimous voice vote. So I would say all in favor, it's easier and fun. If you can please say aye.
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 Excellent. Any abstentions? Any objections? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for this lengthy meeting, for your lending your time and talents to advancing our community. The meeting is now adjourned, and I look forward to being in touch with you between now and the October meeting to make sure that we address all of the open issues. Thank you, Marlene. Thank you to the committee members. Thank you to the general public. And a reminder, September 30th, district needs meeting for those who would like to further comment on the priorities.
Thank
Anything
you.
else,
Good
Marlene?
night.
We're good. Good night. everyone.
Good Night. night. Thank you, night. Good night.
Thank you all. Please stay safe, everyone. Marlene, can you end the recording? And I just have one question for you before you jump.
Hold on.